3 years ago, I stood on the porch of the home I spent a decade building, holding a single cardboard box containing everything I owned. My ex-husband didn't just walk out. He stripped my bank accounts clean, destroyed my credit score, and left me buried under $180,000 in debts he had secretly racked up in my name. As he drove away in his new Porsche with his 24-year-old assistant in the passenger seat, he turned to me and said, "You're a financial black hole, Clara. You'll be living on the streets in 6 months." He was wrong. He thought he had erased my future. What he didn't realize was that in his desperate greed to take everything I had, he left behind the one thing he couldn't steal: my brain, my drive, and the exact paper trail that would lead to his complete unraveling. Here is how I went from total ruin to building an 8-figure empire, and what happened when he came crawling back to demand his half. My name is Clara Mitchell. I am 34 years old, and for 8 long years, I truly believed I was building a forever home with a man who loved me. That delusion shattered on a rainy Tuesday morning. I came home early from work to find 2 men in suits loading our furniture into a moving truck, while a process server stood on our porch holding an envelope. Marcus, my husband, had packed his bags, cleaned out every single cent from our joint checking and savings accounts, and signed a lease on a luxury high-rise downtown. When I called him, sobbing and demanding to know what was happening, his voice was chillingly detached. He told me he was filing for divorce, effective immediately. But the true nightmare was only beginning. Over the next 48 hours, as I dug through our financial records, the full scope of his betrayal came to light. Marcus hadn't just walked away. He had systematically stripped my life to the bone. For over 2 years, he had been funneling our shared assets into a secret offshore shell company, all while taking out massive personal loans and maxing out credit lines under my name. He left me legally tied to over $180,000 in crushing debt while he walked away scot-free to start a lavish new life with his 24-year-old assistant. He left me with nothing but empty rooms, maxed-out credit cards, and a broken spirit. The weeks that followed felt like a slow walk through hell. I had to sell what little personal property I had left just to security deposit a cramped, 400-square-foot studio apartment on the bad side of town. The walls were paper-thin, the plumbing leaked, and every single morning began with the relentless ringing of debt collectors demanding money I simply didn't have. To keep a roof over my head, I worked 2 exhausting entry-level jobs, working retail cashier shifts by day and scrubbing floors for a night commercial cleaning service. Every night, I would collapse onto a thin mattress on the floor, my body aching and my eyes burning with tears. But among the pile of collections notices on my folding table lay the spark that would change everything. While painstakingly sifting through the mountains of debt paperwork to figure out a repayment plan, my background in logistics and supply chain analysis kicked in. I began noticing a massive, glaring gap in how local artisanal businesses handled their shipping logistics. They were overpaying wildly for inefficient third-party services. Sitting in the public library on a borrowed laptop during my brief 2-hour break between shifts, I drafted a lean, hyper-efficient logistics framework specifically tailored for small businesses. I had no startup capital, no fancy office, and 0 financial safety net. But I had my mind, an unshakable rage, and a burning resolve to never let anyone control my destiny again. I took my very first client on a handshake agreement. That single handshake agreement became the cornerstone of my new life. For 18 months, sleep became a luxury I rarely afforded myself. I spent my days pitching small business owners, refining shipping routes, and managing inventory from my cramped studio, while spending my nights analyzing logistics data until my eyes bled. Every spare dollar I earned didn't go toward fancy dinners or new clothes. It went directly into aggressive debt repayment and reinvesting into custom software to automate my operation. Word spread quickly among local vendors. In an industry dominated by bloated, slow-moving corporate giants, my platform was fast, flexible, and cut shipping costs by 30%. Within 2 years, my bare-bones consulting effort morphed into a full-scale B2B logistics management firm. The turning point came when I landed a massive regional distribution contract with a major Midwest grocery chain. That single deal netted enough revenue to completely liquidate the remaining $180,000 of debt Marcus had saddled me with. For the first time in years, I took a deep, unburdened breath. I officially incorporated as Mitchell Logistics Group. Rather than flaunting my success on social media or throwing lavish parties, I stayed completely under the radar. I wore simple suits, drove a sensible sedan, and poured every ounce of profit back into scaling the infrastructure. By year 3, Mitchell Logistics had grown into an 8-figure powerhouse operating across 4 states with zero corporate debt and skyrocketing recurring revenue. I had built an empire from the ashes of my total destruction, completely on my own terms. While my company expanded exponentially, Marcus's house of cards was rapidly caving in around him. Karma has a quiet way of balancing the scales. The speculative commercial real estate market he had poured all his stolen capital into took a devastating turn. Between rising interest rates, abysmal management, and his own bloated, arrogant spending habits, his ventures began bleeding cash at a terrifying rate. Within 36 months, he was teetering on the edge of total personal and professional bankruptcy. His savior complex and glamorous lifestyle were evaporating, along with his young assistant, who walked out the second the black credit cards started getting declined. Desperate for a lifeline, Marcus was flipping through a regional business journal when he froze. Plastered across a 2-page spread was a profile of the fastest-growing logistics firm in the Midwest, highlighting its founder and CEO, Clara Mitchell. He couldn't believe his eyes. The woman he had discarded like trash, the woman he claimed was a financial black hole, was now sitting atop a multi-million-dollar empire. 3 days later, he showed up at my corporate headquarters. I was sitting in my corner office on the top floor when my receptionist buzzed through, saying a man without an appointment insisted on seeing me, claiming it was a personal matter of utmost urgency. Through the glass walls, I saw Marcus stepping out of the elevator. He was wearing a tailored suit that was visibly frayed at the cuffs, holding a cheap bouquet of convenience store flowers, and wearing a practiced, remorseful smile. He walked toward my desk, arms open, pretending the last 3 years of absolute cruelty had never happened. I looked at him across my oak desk, feeling nothing but a cold, hard detachment. When Marcus realized his soft-spoken apologies, fake tears, and pathetic attempts at nostalgia weren't going to manipulate me into handing him a financial lifeline, the mask slipped completely. His contrite smile twisted into a bitter, familiar sneer. He dropped the withered flowers onto my glass coffee table, leaned over my desk, and spat. "You owe me, Clara. You wouldn't have anything if it weren't for me." 3 days later, a legal courier served me with a 70-page lawsuit. Marcus wasn't just asking for a payout, he was coming for my throat. His high-priced, predatory attorney had drafted an audacious claim arguing that the foundational intellectual property, industry contacts, and initial capital for Mitchell Logistics Group were secretly developed while we were still legally married. He was suing for 50% equity in my multi-million-dollar company, retroactively demanded spousal support, and sought an immediate freeze on all my corporate accounts, pending trial. He thought I would panic. He thought the terror of losing my company would force me into a quiet, massive out-of-court settlement. But the Clara he knew, the naive, agreeable woman who trusted him blindly, had died 3 years ago in that empty house. Instead of settling, I hired Sarah Vance, ruthless high-stakes litigation attorney known for destroying corporate predators. When Sarah reviewed his filing, she didn't just plan a defense, she spotted Marcus's fatal flaw. By suing me for assets derived from our marriage, Marcus had legally reopened the entire financial discovery window from our original divorce proceedings. He had just handed us the keys to his own destruction. The deposition took place in a stark, glass-walled conference room on the 42nd floor of my attorney's high-rise building. Marcus sat across from me, flanked by his legal team, looking arrogant, cocky, and entirely convinced he had me backed into a corner. He genuinely believed that the threat of a long, public trial would force me to hand over millions just to make him go away. His attorney began smirkingly laying out their demands, citing marital equity and demanding an immediate audit of my company's assets. When they finished, Sarah, my attorney, leaned back in her leather chair, opened a thick black binder, and slid a stack of certified financial documents across the table. "Before we discuss Mrs. Mitchell's business," Sarah said smoothly, "let's discuss the felony fraud Mr. Mitchell committed during your original divorce." Marcus's smirk instantly vanished. During our preparation, Sarah's forensic accounting team had meticulously cross-referenced the hidden shell company accounts Marcus used 3 years ago with his official court-sworn bankruptcy filings. The evidence was ironclad. Marcus had lied under oath, falsified tax documents, and committed intentional marital asset concealment, a severe federal crime. By filing this frivolous lawsuit to grab my new company, Marcus had legally reopened our original divorce settlement. He hadn't just invited us to inspect his past, he had legally mandated it. Sarah calmly explained that if Marcus didn't unconditionally drop the lawsuit within 24 hours, we would immediately hand the binder over to the state prosecutor, the IRS, and the bankruptcy court. The room fell dead silent. I looked Marcus directly in the eye and saw the precise moment his world shattered into pieces. Within 2 hours of that deposition, Marcus's legal team formally withdrew the lawsuit with prejudice, terrified of facing federal fraud charges. But the damage to his life was already permanent. His own attorneys abandoned him over unpaid fees, his remaining real estate holdings went into foreclosure, and the IRS launched a formal investigation into his shell accounts. Marcus ended up completely broke, facing a mountain of legal debt and back taxes, living in a dingy basement apartment far worse than the studio he had once forced me into. As for me, I didn't celebrate with champagne or throw a party. The true victory wasn't watching Marcus fall. It was standing on the executive balcony of my headquarters, watching our shipping trucks pull out into the evening light. I realized that true security doesn't come from a bank balance or a marriage certificate. It comes from knowing that no matter how completely someone burns your world to the ground, you have the strength, the intellect, and the unshakable resilience to rebuild an empire from the ashes. I survived the ruin. And today, I finally own my future.